After gunning down their parents, Lyle and Erik meticulously picked up all the shell casings likely to erase any evidence. Then they left their home to purchase movie tickets as an alibi. And later that night, when they returned home, they called the police.
And put on the dramatics, right?
Yeah, because you can listen to the call. And in that call, Lyle can be heard crying hysterically.
Really?
Telling the dispatcher, they shot and killed my parents. And in the background, Erik is screaming. And Lyle can be heard telling him to shut up and get away from them. Welcome to the Compendium, an assembly of fascinating and intriguing things. We're a weekly variety podcast where each week we dive into stories pulled from the darker corners of true crime, the annals of your old unread history books, and the who's who of extraordinary people. We give you just enough information to stand your ground at any social gathering. I'm your ringmaster this episode, Adam Cox.
And I'm your freak show, your freak in the sheets show, sideshow, Kyle Risi.
You didn't think about that beforehand, did you?
No, I didn't. But that's a good one. I'm your freak in the sheets.
I don't know. Maybe not for everyone.
I'm going to Dutch oven you. That's what I mean when I say freak in the sheets.
Good grief. In today's episode of The Compendium, we're stepping into the halls of a mansion where wealth and privilege hide a chilling secret. What could turn blood against blood in a house that seemed to have it all?
Ooh, very cryptic. I have no idea what this is about.
Today's episode focuses on José and Kitty Menendez.
Hang on. I recognize those names. Where do I recognize those names from? Okay, carry on. I'm sure you'll tell me.
As I was saying, Today's episode focuses on José and Kitty Menendez, who were brutally murdered in 1989. But what was unexpected, which shocked the world at the time, was that their gruesome deaths were at the hands of their own two sons, Lyle and Erik Menendez.
Oh, I know this story. Check you out looping back on episodes that we've done in the past.
Yeah?
Yeah, very relevant.
Thank you.
Why don't you go tell everyone, how they will know about this episode?
You may know about this episode from the Billionaire Boys Club, where we alluded to the story of the Menendez Brothers based on, what was his name? Joe Hunt, who had killed in order for greed, essentially.
Yeah. Essentially, and a TV show was made about the Billionaire Boys Club, which then aired in the late 80s at some point. And then these two little jokers watched it, got the inspiration to kill their father, and then bam, they're now their own thing. So this is their story.
That's what you think happened.
What do you mean?
There's a lot more to the story than that.
Really?
They didn't just watch a TV show, Kyle. I don't think I can pad out 60 minutes of some guys that just watch a TV show and kill their parents.
Well, I mean, okay, I get it. I don't know what's happening here.
Okay.
It's a bit weird.
So today we're going to uncover why the two brothers wanted to kill their parents.
For money, obviously.
Well, potentially, because initially the brothers got off scot-free. They were living a life of luxury, spending the fortunes of their rich family and insurance payout. But eventually the police caught up with them in a way that the brothers could never have predicted.
Really?
On the surface of things, these two brothers seemed like cold-blooded murderers, killing their parents for greed and early inheritance. But actually, as time went on, something more sinister was at play, a dark secret that no family would ever want revealed.
Oh, very exciting.
So this case had polarized opinions for decades. Some people believe justice was served and these brothers should be locked up, but crucial evidence was left out of their final trial, which people keep coming back to time and time again, speculating actually, should these brothers be free? Is there actually a valid reason for what they did?
Really? Wow.
So yeah, from the Billionaires Boys Club, that was what inspired me to go and research this. It had nothing to do with jumping on the bandwagon of the new Netflix show from Ryan Murphy. He's doing a sequel to Jeffrey Dahmer Monsters.
Oh, really?
Anthology.
Oh, that's so cool.
And it just so happens that it's out this week, so it's nothing to do that. That's
hence why
purely
you've
coincidental.
expedited this episode. Kyle, I need to do next week's episode. I'm fine. But yeah, so when we were doing the Billionaire Boys Club episode, of course, I didn't go into the story. It was just a footnote in our research. But I didn't realize that there was actually more to it than just a bunch of these little thuggy kids that went and killed their dad, but their mum as well, right?
Yeah.
Wow. So, yeah, I'm really intrigued to hear more about this story.
One thing I will say, this episode does come with a warning about suicide, murder, and sexual abuse. I'm not going to go into too many of the specifics, but I will be laying down some of the facts to tell us the key points. So understandably, if you prefer to skip this episode, then perhaps listen to one of our lighter topics, like lesbian nuns taking down the church, or a millionaire dog that hires some porn stars whilst managing a football team.
All very light topics.
Yes.
Yeah.
But
that's very responsible of you, Adam.
I know, I thought for this episode in particular, it's quite dark. We're talking quite jovial now, but actually it's quite dark.
Yeah, that's it. And I think a lot of people always tell us that when we approach very difficult, sensitive subjects, they're always really impressed with how sensitively we address it, even though we've never issued a warning like this before.
But with that being said, before we get into this week's story, I think it's time for
all the latest things. Step right up and welcome to this week's All the Latest Things, where we unveil the fascinating, the extraordinary, and the downright loopy stories and strange facts from the past week. So, Adam, do you know what? Since you're hosting this week, I'll go first.
Okay. What do you got for us this week, Kyle?
So, Adam, tell me, what do you know of burner phones?
Usually, if you're involved in crime, then...
Sneaking cookies?
Yeah, in particular as a 5-year-old, I used to have a burner phone.
Yeah.
No, if you're involved in drugs or probably like killing people, you might have a burner phone because you don't want to get caught.
Exactly. So I was listening to this amazing podcast episode on Search Engine titled, What is the Best Phone to Do Crime On? And
is it a Nokia 3310?
Oh, that's what I figured, right? But even like back in the days when Nokia 3310s were a thing, it was even like worse than that. Like you would just go to a gas station, you'd buy this like $5 phone, open it up. It's a one-use thing. You can't even take the battery out. And once it's dead, then it's dead, and then you just chuck it. So the episode is all about encrypted mobile networks and how they have become the lifeline, but also the downfall for some of the world's most notorious criminals and criminal networks. If you are like an organized crime network, you of course depend on having secure communications. Like think drug cartels, human trafficking, puppy thieves, cookie sneakers. You need a way of communicating, and you can't just go to the gas station and buy like millions and millions of these different kind of burner phones. So the go-to company for these encrypted phones is a company called Phantom Secure. And basically, it's a piece of software that's on these smartphones. And when you use these phones, your communications are virtually untraceable. So naturally, the FBI see this as a major problem because now they can't tap in to these criminals' ongoing activity.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, as you know, we have the NSA, who is this big kind of massive organization in America that's essentially listened to everybody's phone calls in the entire world. And that makes this very difficult because these phones are encrypted. So when you then try and tap into these phone calls, you can't even tell who is speaking, or you can't even get the tone of the person's voice. It just sounds like someone's talking, but it's all scrambled. You just can't tell.
Is it like when sometimes on Sesame Street, you'd hear the other person on the phone and like...
Yeah, exactly like that. So this all changed when the FBI arrested the CEO of Phantom Secure, this kind of big company that's supplying access to this software. And so the company collapses, and now there's tens of thousands of criminals who don't have a way to communicate within their kind of criminal networks. So they start looking for alternatives, and they turn to a small company called Anom. This results in that quickly becoming the biggest encrypted phone provider in the world. Anom, are really engaged with their criminal crime lord customers, even offering all the best features, and they'll engage them as well to build even better features. And basically, the network just takes off like wildfire, and they become the biggest encrypted phone network in the world. Now, one of these crime lord influences was really important because, of course, he was a big boss, and then he would tell all his friends how great Anom was, and then they would then bring in Anom inside their crime circles, and that's how it grows. Because the thing is, if you need a new secure encrypted phone network to communicate with all your buddies, then everyone in your network needs that as well, right? So you don't want to have hundreds of different types of networks. You just want the one.
Sure, that makes sense. If Fat Tony has this, then you're going to go with what Fat Tony has.
Exactly. So one of these crime lord influencers, he was promoting Anom, and all of his associates start using it. But despite using the most secure communication, his operations keep getting busted, and people around him start suggesting that maybe it's the phones that are the problem. And he's like, no, I know Anon. I've been down there. I've seen them. They literally build features for us. And with that engaged, it's definitely not them. It's got to be some kind of mole inside organization. And he was partially right. There was a leak, but not in the way that you imagined. Turns out that the real leak was the Phantom Secure CEO, the founder of Anon. He approached the FBI with his proposition that he would hand over his company in exchange for immunity. So the FBI take control of Anon and they grow it into the biggest encrypted phone provider in the world. And what I love is that these crime lords are reaching out to Anon, like requesting brand new features for bosses to be able to manage and monitor their entire network. So they've got this aggregated list of all the calls and all these text messages and all sorts. So the FBI are like, yeah, no problem. They'll just make everything easier for us because now we can have everything in one big list.
That is so smart.
So the FBI had access to every single phone call, every single text, every single selfie, emoji, everything. Like literally, there were selfies of like guys holding up like a peace sign with a dead guy in the background that they've just killed. And then it's captioned, just for lols. That's how ruthless and just unconcealing these criminals were. They just are pretty much doing it out in the open because they trust these networks so much. The crazy thing is that the scale of all this criminal activity is just massive. Like it was 5 times more than what the FBI anticipated, to the point that they couldn't go off and keep arresting everyone because it was just too much. They didn't have enough manpower to do it. So they decided, okay, in 2021, they were going to conduct a sting operation and they were going to carry out hundreds of raids across multiple countries, starting in Australia, moving westwards as the sun was rising.
So as you're saying, as people were waking up, they were then nabbing someone.
And the reason for that is because you don't want the word to spread, right? So you want to start from the previous day. So you can arrest everyone in Australia, everyone else in Indonesia is still asleep. And then when everyone in Indonesia start waking up, you start arresting them. Then you move to Europe and then you move to America. And so they end up arresting like 1,000 of the biggest criminals in the world. And when the sun rises in California, the acting US attorney, Randy Grossman, hosts a press conference saying, we've just arrested 1,000 of the biggest criminals in the world. And we did it because this whole time we were Anon. Suckers!
Wow.
I had no idea that any of this stuff was going on. Like, they've literally cleansed the world of 1,000 of the biggest criminals in the world.
And so they couldn't have kept that going because they couldn't manage it, you're saying?
Yeah, it was just too much. But they thought that, okay, if we go public now, what this does is that it leaves these criminals now second guessing whether or not there's another company out there that's also been infiltrated by the FBI. And there's a high likelihood that they're going to suspect that there was, because they're going to think, why would the FBI give up on something like this if they hadn't also infiltrated all these other companies? So now there's this big, massive insecurity.
Invoke this kind of fear a little bit, or paranoia.
So it was just such a brilliant episode. Go and listen to it. I know it's not like an interesting fact or anything, but go and listen to PJ Vote's podcast search engine and check out the episode. It's called What's the Best Phone to Do Crime On? And it's just such a gripping episode.
Good story.
Yep. So that's all my latest things. What have you got?
This week, I found out that a 38-year-old man is believed to be the first guy in the world to suffer this specific strange condition. So he got food poisoning. But guess where he got food poisoning?
In his dick.
Yep.
Yes. How do you get food poisoning in your dick? And why are you dipping your dick in kind of curry?
I don't think he was dipping it. I think what happened is somehow he got contaminated with some rice, because this is the same kind of spores that you find when you leave rice out and then you heat it up. It doesn't matter if you heat it, they're still there, essentially. So these spores, I think, got contaminated because just before his penis started getting sore, he had vomiting and diarrhea. Apparently he had sex with his girlfriend and it was a bit vigorous, and somehow some of the food spores got contaminated. But essentially, after having sex, that's when he contaminated the food poisoning.
Oh, so he got it from his girlfriend?
Or they just eaten, I don't know. And so he went to the doctors and they took some swabs of it because it was all scabbed up and didn't look good. And they were like, this is weird. This is the bacteria that's usually found in food poisoning. Why is it on your penis?
Wow.
So yeah, after about 4 weeks, it all cleared up. But yeah, you couldn't do anything with it. You had to obviously keep it at bay.
Do you know, having something wrong with your willy is the worst.
And then I do have one other quick story, also about a penis. This one is actually 36 feet long.
A penis?
Yeah.
It's got to be 36 feet, actually.
Oh, do you know the one? Steve.
Steve? Adam's dad?
Anyway.
Yeah, tell me, it can't be an animal then.
No, I didn't know about this. There is like a engraving or like a marking within the earth. It's called the Cerne Abbas Giant, which is found in Dorset.
Oh, yes, of course.
It's 180 feet tall. And apparently all these volunteers are chalking the outline because, I don't know, it gets weeds, it needs kind of remarking. And so there's all these people that have been recently touching up the 36-foot penis. But I've never realised this existed because it dates back to the 17th century.
Did you not?
No.
The Giant of Dorset. Yeah, it's really famous. It's on like a hillside and he's holding a big club, isn't he? And he's just got this big, massive penis that kind of comes up towards his chest.
Yeah, I've never seen this before. And it's quite impressive, really. But they don't really know why it's there. They talk about whether it's to do with fertility or the gods. But I just think it was probably, I don't know, a couple of school kids drawing a penis in the soil.
And that thing is big, though, and that's a lot of effort.
I know, but I think the thing is now people go, but what does it mean? Actually, it's just a prank.
It's like a bit of graffiti, right? Like you think of something profound, but actually they translate it and it turns out that it's a your mama joke or something silly like that.
Yeah, and that's it for all the latest things. So let's start from the very beginning. José Enrique Menendez was born on May the 6th, 1944 in Havana, Cuba. He was the youngest of 3 children and his parents were renowned athletes. His father was an exceptional football player while his mother was a celebrated swimmer who was even conducted into Cuba's Sports Hall of Fame. The family was really well off thanks to José's dad's successful accounting firm. However, after Fidel Castro came to power in 1959...
Fidel?
What's his name?
Fidel.
Fidel.
Fidel sounds like his dog. Fidel and Fidel.
Yeah, when his dog came to power. Back in 1959, the Menendez family's future in Cuba became uncertain. And so concerned for their children's welfare, the parents made the difficult decision to send their youngest son, José, to the United States for a better life. So at just 16 years old, José arrives in Pennsylvania with no money and no knowledge of English.
They live in Cuba, a communist country. I find it difficult for them to go, it's a really difficult decision for us to send our kid to the land of the free.
Well, I guess like parting with your family is still challenging.
Sure, yeah.
So despite the odds, José worked tirelessly following in his parents' footsteps in both athleticism and business acumen. He excelled in sports, particularly swimming, and earned a full scholarship to Southern Illinois University. While José had always dreamed of attending an Ivy League school, his financial situation didn't allow that at the time. However, he vowed that if he ever had children, they would have every opportunity that he had missed out on.
Nice.
It was at a Southern Illinois University that José met Mary Louise Anderson, otherwise known as Kitty.
It's such a classic 80s name, isn't it?
Or Kitty.
Yeah. Kitty.
She came from a family that had seen its fair share of struggles. Her father had left her mother and remarried, which left Kitty and her mother to fend for themselves. Kitty worked at the university's broadcast centre producing content for radio and TV. And in 1962, she met José and the two quickly fell in love and they got married in 1963 and moved to New York. In 1968, they welcomed their first son, Joseph Lyle Menendez, followed by their second son, Erik Galen Menendez. José's career was on a meteoric rise. He started working for Hertz Car Rentals and quickly moved up the ranks, eventually becoming this worldwide general manager by the age of 35. His success allowed the family to live comfortably, and José made sure his sons had access to the best education and opportunities. Despite his background in accounting, José developed a really strong interest in the entertainment industry, and so by the early 1980s, he had become the head of RCA Records, where he was responsible for signing major bands like Duran Duran and the Eurythmics.
Oh, really? Wow, okay.
So this new role brought the family an immense amount of wealth. And in 1986, José moved the family to Beverly Hills, where they lived in a lavish Spanish-style mansion, which I think was previously occupied by Michael Jackson and Elton John.
Wow, so they've got some serious money going on.
They have some serious money. So he's kind of worked his way up. He's come from some wealth, but he has really worked his way up coming from...
Immigrants do, though, don't they? Like, they really kind of like pull the finger out. Yeah. I guess... if you have got the motivation to leave your home country
and get a better life,
then
you're going to work
you're
hard.
motivated to
Whereas us slackers,
work hard. Yeah,
just
exactly.
like, we'll never amount to anything.
No, maybe not you.
So Lyle and Erik, they never had to want for anything. They were always dressed in the best clothes. They would be chauffeured to school in a limo. And so these two boys were incredibly privileged. So behind the facade of wealth and success, the Menendez family were far from perfect. José was a ruthless businessman, known for his cold and controlling nature. He applied the same strict, overbearing approach to his parenting, expecting his sons to excel in every aspect of their lives. Lyle and Erik were pushed to their limits, with every moment of their day scheduled and controlled by their father. He and Kitty would sometimes do their sons' homework just so they could get the best marks.
Really? Damn, I wish my mum would do that for me.
She just didn't care, Kyle.
She just didn't. In fact, anything, she would sneak into my room and sabotage my homework. Sorry, sir, my mum ate my homework.
Again? Yeah, she's hungry.
Yeah.
She's got the munchies.
She's just trying to see my downfall.
So keeping up appearances was really key for this family. José even went so far as to make Lyle wear a toupee when he started to bald at the age of 14.
Oh, that's so cruel. That's horrible. How unfortunate, 14 years old, going bald. But also, how humiliating.
Yeah, he wanted his family to appear perfect. That was it, essentially.
I get it. You just want the best, right?
Yeah, but feels like he's taking it just a tad too far. Kitty, meanwhile, struggled with her own issues. After discovering José's numerous affairs, including a long-term relationship with another woman, she fell into a deep depression. Kitty began drinking heavily and became increasingly suicidal. She felt trapped in her marriage, but at the same time, she didn't want to say goodbye to the life she had become accustomed to.
Yeah. Damn, bitch. I don't like this, but I like the caviar.
One time she almost overdosed on Valium. Whether it was on purpose or not, I don't know, but she had some serious issues. As the boys grew older, they began to rebel against their father's strict rules. In 1988, Lyle and Erik, along with a friend, started burgling homes in their affluent neighborhood, stealing high-value items just for the fun of it because they didn't need the money.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting that you get this rebellious side because you've been pushed into this box and forced to be a certain way. And when you come from a life of privilege, so often you find these people acting out just as a form of rebellion because
they have to be perfect the rest of the time or whatever it is. And the thing is, when they do get caught, José used his influence within Beverly Hills to get them out of any serious trouble, which just enabled their reckless behavior, I guess, if they know that Dad
we're untouchable, you know.
Yeah. But the boys' rebellion didn't stop there. Lyle, who was expected to follow in his father's footsteps in terms of career and progression and attend an Ivy League school, initially had his application to Princeton rejected due to poor grades, probably because his parents, who were doing his homework for him, he never got the chance.
Yeah.
After a year at community college, he was eventually accepted, but once on campus, he continued to act out, and he was caught plagiarizing and was suspended, only to have his father swoop in and smooth things over and get him back in.
He probably pulled him aside and went, "That's not how you plagiarize, son. Let me show you. I've had a lot of years practice plagiarizing your homework." Or not plagiarize, but rewriting your own homework.
Yeah. By the summer of 1989, tensions in the Menendez household were at an all-time high. Lyle had allegedly gotten a girlfriend pregnant, and it's rumored that José paid for an abortion and forced him to end that relationship.
Wow.
Although I couldn't find loads of evidence of that, but there was some reports of that. So don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I mean, not very many people want to document
that.
Something like that.
Erik, meanwhile, had started losing his tennis matches and turned down
I thought you were going to say hair.
No, he's still got his hair.
He's still got his hair. Still wearing his toupees.
No, that was Lyle is the one that's lost his hair or losing his hair. Erik still got good hair. But he was losing tennis matches and turned down an offer from Berkeley in favor of attending UCLA, much to his father's disappointment. But the final straw came on the evening of August the 20th, 1989. José and Kitty were settling in for the night. Their sons, who had told them that they were going out to see a film, returned home armed with shotguns. They entered the den where their parents were sitting and opened fire.
That came out of nowhere. So their parents are dead?
José was shot first. His initial wounds weren't fatal. He was still breathing after being shot multiple times. These include 2 shots in his right arm, 1 to his left elbow, 1 to his right forearm, and 1 below his shoulder. The most gruesome injury, though, was to his head. According to a doctor who conducted the autopsy, the head wound was so severe that it left a gaping laceration large enough to fit an adult fist through.
Jesus.
So basically almost decapitated.
Yeah, and I know that sounds horrendous, but you know what? There's nothing worse than getting shot in an elbow. Because you know, like when you hit your funny bone
Right.
on your knee or on your elbow. And it bloody hurts.
Do you know what? If you get shot in the elbow, I doubt you're going, ooh, 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 as in...
No, I know, but times that by 1,000,000. You know how sore that is when you bang your elbow.
Well, I don't know if he's even got an elbow left after this,
No,
to be honest.
and hopefully I'd rather be immediately shot in the head afterwards.
The shot to his head actually had deformed his face. It mutilated his brain and fractured multiple bones in his face and jaw.
Damn.
Kitty tried to flee, but was shot multiple times as she struggled to escape. After leaving their parents bleeding on the floor, the brothers stepped out to reload their shotguns. When they returned back into the house, they leaned over, pressed the shotgun against their mother's left cheek, and fired. Weirdly, the mother's injuries seemed more gruesome and horrific than those carried out on their father.
Why?
Well, not too sure at this stage. One of the most telling injuries was to her thumb, which was nearly shot off, suggesting that she tried to shield her face.
Oh, and that's your mum.
And in a final grisly act, they shot out their parents' kneecaps in an attempt to make the murders look like a mob hit.
Really? Ah, damn.
After gunning down their parents, Lyle and Erik meticulously picked up all the shell casings likely to erase any evidence. Then they left their home to purchase movie tickets as an alibi. And later that night, when they returned home, they called the police.
And put on the dramatics, right?
Yeah, because you can listen to the call. And in that call, Lyle can be heard crying hysterically.
Really?
Telling the dispatcher, they shot and killed my parents. And in the background, Erik is screaming. And Lyle can be heard telling him to shut up and get away from them. It is an interesting sort of situation here.
Yeah, and did you hear this call?
I've heard bits of the call and some of the other sort of evidence that will come on to. Yeah, I think you can look it up on YouTube. I'll try and see if I can find it.
I think that's definitely one for the show notes, right?
When the officers arrived, they found the brothers outside screaming and crying. They ran past the officers through the gate and collapsed on the street, seemingly overwhelmed with grief. Erik in particular was so distraught that he began hitting his head against a tree, forcing Lyle to comfort him, and the police initially believed that this was a genuine emotional response.
Even I think that this is genuine.
I know. It's just really weird that I've described the horrific murder, and then you've got this show.
This juxtapositioning of their response afterwards. Crazy, and just no one suspects him at this moment in time.
Pretty much. So that night, the police believed the murders were the result of a botched mob hit or a business deal gone wrong.
Because the kneecaps.
Exactly. And, and Jose had plenty of enemies in his career, and the brutal nature of the killings seemed to support that theory. Strangely, the police had dismissed the idea that it could have been the sons. This was a rich, predominantly white family in Beverly Hills, and they sounded traumatized. I guess the police just thought, yeah, it can't be a family member. It must be, I don't know, some criminal.
Yeah. This is a well-to-do family. They have everything.
Yeah.
Why would their life not be perfect?
But the thing is, had they tested the brothers themselves or their car for gunshot residue that evening, then the case would have been solved instantly.
See, this is the thing, man. You got to follow the processes. Even if they seem innocent, just give them a quick test.
Well, this is
They'll swap of fingers.
And the interviews I think the police conducted that evening, I think they cut them short because Erik is distraught and crying, and they're like, oh, that's okay, we'll stop it here, rather than going, no, I'm going to probe you further to make sure we get all the information. So the police do come under quite a lot of scrutiny. But what was odd, there was no sign of forced entry, nothing appeared to have been stolen, and the only room in disarray was the den where the murders took place. However, as investigations carried on and the police dug deeper, suspicions began to turn towards the brothers. In the months following the murders, Lyle and Erik went on a spending spree, burning through $700,000 in just a few months. They bought Rolexes, luxury cars. Lyle even purchased a buffalo wing restaurant in Princeton.
Oh, really?
Erik, meanwhile, hired a full-time tennis coach and participated in several tournaments in Israel. And the brothers eventually left Beverly Hills Mansion and they moved into this kind of adjoining house or flat complex in Marina del Rey.
Are you saying that that is the smoking gun that initially raised suspicions that they might have been involved because they went on the spending spree?
It didn't add up because I guess they would have thought the brothers, the sons, should have shown more remorse.
Oh, well, how soon afterwards did this all happen?
Within a few months. So they're jetting off to the Caribbean and London.
Yeah, but they're young kids. I'd rather be sad in first class on a jet going off to the Caribbean.
Well, the family, like aunties and stuff like that, do say this is normal behavior with the amount of money that they had anyway. So it's not like it's that unusual, but I guess maybe they're like, maybe you should have had a quiet few months and then did that. So that was just one of the things that kind of sparked some controversy. Their behaviour at the parents' memorial service also raised some eyebrows. On the podium, Lyle read a letter from José that was filled with love and pride for his sons. But Lyle himself lacked emotion, and he made a statement that his father always said, "You will never fill my shoes."
Aww.
And he jokingly said, "Guess what? I'm wearing my father's shoes today." So it's a little bit, I don't know, that's not kind of the thing you'd say at your dad's funeral.
It depends. Clearly, there's an undertone here of some anger towards the father, because I've been there where you don't necessarily have fond feelings about someone that has died and you're at their funeral. So I completely get this. Yeah.
But I guess to anyone else that doesn't know the story at this stage, and they seemed like a well-to-do, really nice family on the surface of things, they're just like, that's unusual. Why would you say that? That's not respectful.
Yeah.
And so Erik wasn't really dealing with things very well at all. He is really struggling to come to terms of what happened in the aftermath of killing his parents. He felt a lot of remorse, guilt, and he confesses to his therapist, Dr. Jerome Oziel.
So is the therapist like under patient-therapist confidentiality and can't say anything?
Well, in theory, yeah, most patients or therapists would be under this.
Not this one, though.
As it turns out, Erik going to the therapist really angered Lyle because Erik had told someone else, and obviously the secret's out. But Erik was feeling so low and suicidal, he was just not in a mentally good place or be able to deal with it. And so with their secret out, they realized quite early on that Dr. Oziel's intentions may not truly be genuine. Dr. Oziel suggested they come back for a therapy session together.
Oh, no.
And that this time they should record the session. And weirdly, the brothers agree to this and talk about the murder of their parents on tape.
Strange.
Now, you might be thinking,
idiots!
Why would you do that? That's absurd, right? But apparently, Oziel gave the brothers the explanation that by recording these sessions on tape, it would prove to a jury, if anything happened, that they were remorseful. But the brothers felt like they were being coerced into this because they felt that maybe Dr. Oziel could go to the police anyway and that they were being blackmailed.
I see. But has he demanded anything? Oziel, has he demanded anything from them? Has he tried to extort money from them?
No, not necessarily to their face, but what he has sort of admitted is that he is fearful of them. And this is backed up by Dr. Oziel's mistress at the time, Judalon Smith. Oziel had told her that they could be in danger, which would then legally allow him to break client confidentiality if he felt his life was at risk.
I see.
So things between her and the doctor don't really work out for a number of reasons, and she had been eavesdropping on the brothers' therapy sessions and had heard the confessions firsthand. And she had gone to the police to drop the bombshell that Jerome Oziel had a confession from the Menendez brothers about what really happened to José and Kitty Menendez.
Wow.
And so she also claims that Oziel felt like he needed to control Lyle and Erik Menendez and push them into recording an incriminating therapy session. And Smith testifies that Oziel told her he needed to get them to say incriminating things on tape so that they would have something to protect them. And then also he says that he could use that to then divorce his wife because he can be like, oh, I need to divorce you. You're not safe. So Oziel is not a good person.
He doesn't sound like a good guy at all.
So he's in it for himself. And Judalon Smith also says that he said to her that he thought that they would both now be stars. And so perhaps, she's pissed about her ex. She went to the police to get back at him, but it seems like his motives, he didn't really care about the brothers. He was in this for his own motivation. He wanted perhaps to be seen as a hero for getting the confession out of the brothers to bring them down. But the tapes would go under a fair amount of scrutiny when they were used in court, as they seemed to mask the real motivation behind the murders. But before we get into the real reason, let's recap. The confession tape has been made. The police are now aware of its existence through Dr. Oziel's ex-mistress, Judalon Smith.
Okay.
So the police issue a search warrant, and once they get hold of the tape, they hear the brothers tell Dr. Oziel that they killed their mother to put her out of her misery. And that their father deserved to die before his infidelity had.
Oh, okay, because the father was torturing the mother emotionally.
Yeah. So it comes across as a mercy killing.
That's so misguided, though. At what point in your life are you taught that's okay to put someone out of their misery?
And also the way that she was killed.
Shot a thumb off!
And just... It was gruesome. That's not like a single shot and she would die instantly.
Shotgun, because that's like pellets, right? That mutilates you.
Yeah.
How would you want to then you have to now live with that for the rest of your life, knowing that you decide to shoot your mum with a shotgun and she's mutilated, and you probably have to watch her die out as well.
So you can understand why Erik was probably falling to pieces.
Yeah. There's something very difficult to have to deal with.
Yeah. So what do you think's going on?
I have no idea.
Confused. Okay, all will be revealed. I promise. So after the police find the tape, Erik and Lyle are quickly arrested. A case against Lyle and Erik Menendez was built on these confessions, and the evidence that followed confirmed their guilt. Their spending spree, their attempt to cover up the crime, and their approach to life after their parents' deaths painted a picture of two young men who had everything and perhaps committed this horrendous crime in fear of being cut out of their parents' will. So essentially, what the police think at this stage is that they did it for the money and greed. That's why they killed their parents.
Sure, because they were worried that their father was going to cut them out of the will. That's what my understanding is of that story.
Yeah.
But you're saying that's not the reason.
That's the prosecution's angle. The defense angle was a little bit different. Well, actually a lot different, to be fair. They said that they did it out of fear of their lives.
Mm-hmm.
So at the moment, it didn't seem like, based on what the police knew of up till this point, that Erik and Lyle were scared of their parents.
Yeah, that doesn't calculate for me. You're going to need to explain how they were scared for their lives.
The secret they had been keeping mostly hidden from the rest of the world was now out of the bag. Mm-hmm. We know that José was a controlling and strict father, but what many people in the Beverly Hills community didn't know was that he, and along with his wife Kitty, physically, mentally, and sexually abused their two sons from a young age.
Well, both of them?
Both of them.
What? Their mother?
This is where it's going to get a lot.
Oh my God, okay.
So José would do this separately to each of his sons, initially grooming them to say it was one of the ways that men bonded with each other.
Okay.
And so he'd offer to give them perhaps a massage after sports day or whatever it might be. The abuse escalated to include the worst that you can think of, including the use of objects. And he would do this with others in the house, and the rest of the family knew not to enter that room or even go on the same floor as José, because he was with one of the boys in their bedrooms.
Shit.
Initially, José had started the abuse with Lyle, the oldest, and the huge negative impact it would have on him led him to confess in court, whilst crying, that he replicated that same abuse on his younger brother, Erik, which is actually apparently statistically quite a common reaction when you've been abused yourself. You, reverse or role reversal, so to speak.
Yeah, humans are so impressionable, right? That's how we learn from the things around us.
Yeah, so he did the same thing to his brother at a young age as well. Sometimes the boys would go along with it. As they were young, they didn't know any better, and there was a time they got to spend time with their dad.
Oh, God.
What? What?
Just the way that you said that. They got to spend time with... They were getting abused, but it's okay because we got to spend time with Daddy.
I guess, I don't know. Maybe the dad's so busy. I think, from what I understand, you can't really separate maybe the two when you're at that young age, and you still love your father, and this is a way that you get to spend time, even though it makes you really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so they want to, they want to...
I get it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people get it.
When they resisted what their father asked them to do, they were punished. And so the boys probably felt there's no other option. And you think that they would be able to confide in their mother, but she would just brush it off or even lock them in the wardrobe for the day.
She abusing them as well?
She was definitely mentally and maybe physically abusing them.
I guess locking them in a cupboard will do it, right?
Yeah.
And the psychological impacts of your mother going, I don't care.
She wasn't abusing them at the same level as José. So these kids had no escape, and they had to fend for themselves separately. Each brother didn't really know what was happening to the other, not at first anyway. And one of them would keep Tupperware in their bedroom, as they would rather go to the toilet in the Tupperware at night rather than risk waking up their dad by going to the bathroom.
Because he would be violent, or because he would just go and do whatever he's doing to them?
Possibly. It's then an opportunity for him to maybe do what he does.
So was he a homosexual then?
Well, he had a wife. Yeah. He had
and he was
mistress.
Having an affair. Yeah,
affair. So I don't know.
I think anything. You'd just do anything with anyone.
It was only in the weeks leading up to the murders did the brothers eventually reveal what had happened to them both whilst growing up. I guess they perhaps both suspected it, but never had a full conversation about it because there was all these secrets within the family. And it all happened when Erik was looking to go to college, and for him, he saw this as a way out of getting out of the house, away from his parents, and a new start. But his dad, who controlled the money, put his foot down and said, no, you're not moving out. You can commute to this college. I guess for him, he's like, what am I going to do? I'm never going to get out of this.
So did this abuse just carry on up until the moment that they decided to kill their parents? And how old were they?
That's the thing. So for Lyle, I think it was possibly just whilst he was a child. For Erik, it was up till the murders. So I think it lasted over 10 years.
Wow.
Meanwhile, Lyle is having a fight with his mum and she hits him and pulls off his toupee. And Erik sees this and he's like, I had no idea.
My brother wears a toupee?
Yeah.
Oh, he didn't know?
He didn't know. And so the boys console each other. And
But aren't these boys supposed to be brothers? Why are they not sharing things with each other?
I don't know, but there's so many secrets. And so they were threatened not to tell the rest of the family about what's going on. So there's just so much secrecy and shame that eventually after this kind of escalation and fight between the dad and the mum, that the boys console each other and they decide to just air everything out and go like, right, no more secrets. Let's tell each other everything of what's going on. And Lyle is in fact devastated because he was the oldest. He didn't think maybe the same thing would happen to Erik, especially considering Erik's abuse lasted up till the present day. And so they confronted their father and he warns them about telling anyone else. And if they did, that would be the end for them.
In what way? Like their lives?
Pretty much.
Okay.
So when they speak to their mum about it, Kitty basically infers she's always known about the abuse. So this woman had been complicit in what her husband was doing to her two sons.
How can you just stand by and let it happen?
I don't get it either. I mean, she was on a lot of medication she was taking because maybe that numbed the emotion because she was suicidal, everything else, all the affairs. She probably was physically abused by her own husband as well. She was not in a place to protect her sons. But equally, Lyle says in court that she sometimes forced him to touch her and she would wash his body until he was 13, which is obviously, as soon as your kid is able to, you let them clean themselves. So this is a teenager. So she was inappropriate with him. So yeah, she's just as bad in some ways. What's not clear is why they just didn't move out or find another way, even though the father controlled the money and everything that they did.
Well, he tried to find a way, didn't he?
I guess so, but I don't know, his father must have made it so that they just didn't feel like there was another option. And so that's when they're fearing for their lives now, based on the father's threats. So that's when they buy shotguns as a precaution because they thought that their dad would kill them.
Makes sense.
So on the night of the murder, things are still really tense. The brothers claim that the last confrontation happened inside their home's den that night. And after that, Erik and Lyle say that their father closed the den's door to their Beverly Hills mansion, which was unusual for him to do this. And they're like, that's weird. This was just really unusual behavior. But I think it's just this paranoia that probably had set in based on what their father had said to them. And so they're now really afraid. They're thinking, tonight's the night. They're going to kill us. So Lyle and Erik, they went outside to load their shotguns and they went back into the room and they just start firing out of fear.
Shit. Okay, good.
But despite this revelation, the prosecution team just don't buy any of it.
Really? They don't?
No, because they make this really alarming statement that men or boys lacked the necessary equipment to be raped, which is horrendous.
I'm trying to unpack that for a second. Okay.
They're saying that men can't get raped.
Wow.
And I think because perhaps it was a sign of the times where male abuse and rape, whatever age, wasn't taken seriously in the late 80s or early 90s.
Yeah, I even remember it was only like in the early 2000s when Hollyoaks did that episode with Gary Lucy where he was viciously raped by that gang. And I think it was then where I really remember that actually that's when the concept of male rape started coming into the mainstream a lot more. And back then, yeah, I get it. People probably didn't take it seriously.
So the prosecution really laid into the pieces of evidence which would portray Lyle and Erik in the worst possible way. They brought up Erik and Lyle's weird behavior after the death of their parents by going on a shopping spree. Erik had been writing a screenplay with a friend about how a son kills his own father for money. And
well, there's a smoking gun right there, right?
I know, it's a little bit weird. I guess maybe he's kind of, I don't know, putting down on paper things that maybe were happening to him. But his friend admits that some of the details that happened in the screenplay were changed in the lead up to the murders, mirroring real life. So that was suggesting that the murders were pre-planned. Whilst the brothers are emotional on the stand, the prosecution were like, we're not buying that. You were crying when you called the police about your parents being murdered, and you admit that you lied then. So why should we believe you now when you're crying to us?
Yeah, you're so convincing before, right?
Yeah.
Because even you just telling me the story, I was like, there's no way.
Yeah.
that they did this.
I mean, when you put all this together, it doesn't look good for them.
Mm-hmm.
But what's really interesting is how the defense looked at the evidence, because they had an overwhelming amount of evidence to suggest that these two brothers were telling the truth.
Mm-hmm.
There were 51 witnesses that were called and testified that José was abusive, both emotionally and physically, including the relatives of the family.
So how did they know all this?
Not, I guess, him being a paedophile, but they knew that he was strict, that maybe he had hit people before, that he was abusive, mental sort of torture.
He had the propensity. Like, he's more likely than not to have been like that in a way.
His character was of someone that could do that.
Mm-hmm.
When some relatives found out about this, a lot of them, but not all of them, of course, some of them were like, you killed our brother, sister, whatever. But some of them were like, this makes actual sense. In fact, unprompted, certain cousins revealed details of their upbringing, which suggests the boys had tried to make other family members aware of what was happening. For example, the brother's cousin Andy said that Erik had told him about his father's abuse when he was a child. Mm-hmm. And Erik had wondered, speaking to Andy, is it normal for every dad-son relationship for this to happen? And Andy's like, no, that's definitely not normal.
Yeah.
But Andy didn't tell anyone, possibly because of fear of José.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's why I didn't really go anywhere. There was also another cousin, Diane. She spent summers growing up with Lyle and Erik, and she recollected how certain things that happened while she was there were just brushed off, but now they make sense. Because once Lyle had asked if he could sleep in the same room as her one night when he was a kid, and he confessed that José had been touching him down there. And Diane is thinking, oh, what do I do with this information? Oh, I'll go tell Kitty, his mum, and deal with this.
And she's a damn facilitator.
Exactly. And Kitty's like, oh, Lyle's lying. Clearly, perhaps misunderstood, and takes Lyle back to his bedroom. And so for Diane, she's like, oh, maybe I got it wrong, and didn't really think about it too much more than that.
Because it's like straight out of the mouth of babes, and like sometimes kids do say crazy things. And
yeah,
for example, you go to school and be like, yeah, my mum drinks and drives, but no, just because she's drinking soda in the car, right?
Yeah.
But the kid will say it in a weird way, and so the kids can get things wrong.
Exactly. And so that's what she put it down to at the time. But then some other things happened. So growing up, she would play fight with the boys, but sometimes it would go a bit too far and they would strip her to her bra. She told them to stop, and they did. But I guess this hypersexualized behavior is quite common for victims of abuse to act out on others. So it's just all these kind of like jigsaw puzzles are now fitting into place, I think.
Yeah. Everything's falling into place.
They also discovered these photos found of the boys within an envelope titled Erik's 6th birthday.
Oh, God.
So there were these negatives and some developed photos of the boys nude as children, which perhaps isn't that unusual because sometimes it happens with parents.
But the thing is, though, here's the creepy thing. They're in an envelope, they're together, and it's just them. If they were like part of the whole pile of photographs and there's a few of them and there's the kids naked, that's the thing. But if they're grouped together and they're contained together and they're in an envelope and they're marked Erik's 6th birthday, that just sounds a bit
something's a bit
dodge.
Yeah, doesn't it? It doesn't sound good. And the other thing is these photos, they were framed in a way so they purposely cut off the heads of the boys.
So what he's doing, basically, he's 100% exchanging these photographs with other pedophiles in a
Possibly.
network.
I didn't even think about that because of the theory when I was researching this. I thought they might be disconnecting the image from being the son, but yeah, that's actually a good point. Could he have been sharing these photographs?
100%.
What the prosecution say is actually, no, these are just perhaps taken from the boys, and obviously it's not a good angle that they were taking pictures of each other whilst they were perhaps playing naked. They were just saying there's no harm in these photos. But with everything else...
What a load of old shit. They are in an envelope. They're marked Erik's 6th birthday. They're not with the other photographs. There's some negatives in there as well, and the heads have been cut off. Don't tell me that there is nothing wrong there. Don't piss on my leg and tell me that it's raining.
Very astute, yeah. Then there was a bit of a hoo-ha over whether Dr. Oziel's tapes could be used in court.
Uh-huh.
The reason that they could play it was because even though he'd be breaking doctor confidentiality...
His life is in danger.
Exactly. So that's why the tapes could be used. Mm-hmm. And Lyle denies that he ever threatened Dr. Oziel, but, this is like his word against his word. Mm-hmm. After much back and forth between the prosecution and the defense, the judge rules that some of the tape could be omitted as evidence, but some of the recordings left out. But the thing is, throughout the whole tape, the brothers don't reveal the abuse whatsoever. perhaps out of shame, perhaps out of weariness of Dr. Oziel's real
Probably
intentions.
out of shame.
Yeah, I think that's likely.
Yeah, for sure.
The prosecution argues that if the brothers had really been driven to fear by their father through all the abuse as children and young adults, then why hadn't they mentioned that abuse to Dr. Oziel? And the trial took many twists and turns, and in the end, after lengthy deliberations, both juries became deadlocked, meaning no conclusion could be reached successfully.
So a hung jury, basically. Yeah. Which means they go free.
No, they have to now face another trial with a new jury and a new judge. But this time, that judge is limiting any evidence or motive behind the murder which is linked to child abuse.
Really, why? That's their whole defense.
Yeah, but...
So now they don't have a defense.
Pretty much.
That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Why? Do you know why?
A couple of reasons, which I'll get on to in just a second. The jury's also not allowed to vote for manslaughter charges instead of murder charges. And so this, as you rightly said, that the defence's case is no longer as compelling, and therefore trying to get a conviction that holds a lesser sentence than murder was pretty much near impossible.
So it's either they are guilty of murder or they're not guilty of murder, but then we can't even bring up what their motive might have been for doing it, which was, of course, the abuse.
Yeah, I think it could have been brought up, but the amount of evidence was limited, so it's not as powerful or
compelling enough. Sure, I understand what you're saying, but why?
So one of the reasons people think that the judge's decision to limit the evidence surrounding the molesting and everything like that was that the police and justice system had been mocked and scrutinised recently from the O.J. Simpson trial, where O.J. was acquitted of murder. And so people speculate the justice system just didn't want another hung jury or killers to go free. And so regardless of their motive, they were killers and they needed to be punished.
That's horrendous. That's such a major miscarriage of justice. Okay, yes, they killed, and probably on a technicality, they are guilty of that. But you need to consider motive as well, right?
Yeah.
And yes, they probably should be punished for killing someone because that's sort of not the right thing to do. But how you killed them, so the manslaughter side of things, that's so key because then otherwise they're going to go to prison for life.
And this is why it's still debated and a hot topic in terms of a lot of people think they should serve time, but not to the degree that they have done. Of course.
I had no idea that this is where this story would go down.
Yeah, neither did I. I just knew of it based on what you said in the Billionaire Boys Club episode.
And you haven't even mentioned the Billionaire Boys Club. You didn't mention the bit where they were sitting down in the den. They were watching this TV show on the Billionaire Boys Club, and they were like, do you know what? This is how we do it.
Do you know what? I will reference that a little bit later on.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
The other thing is, in the second trial, more evidence from the tape is played to the jury, and without the brothers speaking specifically about the abuse, it only strengthens the prosecution's argument about what they did and the motivation behind it. This tape comes under a lot of scrutiny, particularly by the defense and those wanting a retrial. They critique Dr. Oziel for having leading questions, suggesting theories which the brothers respond to and agree to in hindsight, such as the death of their mother being a mercy killing because she couldn't live without her husband and her troubled past and attempted suicide.
Okay.
So the defense pick up on these clues that Lyle and Erik talk about, which, if it had been a good therapist, would have picked up on and probed further. But he doesn't. He ignores them because they just don't fit with his theory. For example, the brothers talk about their childhood being about survival, or basic training is the words that they use.
Basic training.
Which, suggests a strict upbringing. I would never describe my childhood as being basic training.
I'd describe your childhood as you being basic.
Thank you.
And I mean, if it was training, you weren't picking it up because you were in a high chair till you were 7. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a fact.
I will also add to that.
What?
That I was able to get in and out of the high chair by myself. We were short on room.
Yeah, it was your willingness to not let go. Your parents didn't put a stop to it.
They did eventually.
Until you were 7.
I was eventually allowed a chair.
Just imagine you. By the way, just so our listeners know, when Adam was a small little Adam, he looked exactly like Russell from Up. So imagine that for a second. But he also looked like, what was the guy from the James Bond film? Nick Nack.
Oh, God.
He looked like a combination of Nick Nack and Russell from Up. Yeah. And I just imagine you getting up into your high chair, putting yourself in, and just being this little evil, little cute little kid.
Oh, that was me, yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Russell Nick Nack.
Thanks for telling everyone that. So back to the tape. Lyle and Erik gave a lot of cryptic answers, saying they were in a dangerous situation leading up to the murders, where anything could happen at any time.
Sure. I believe that.
So this alludes to their fear, but again, Dr. Azil doesn't ask, what do you mean by a dangerous situation? If you killed your parents out of greed or, I don't know, anger because you had a tough upbringing or whatever, what do you mean? What's a dangerous situation?
Yeah, an imminent dangerous situation, which means that they're going to be hurt or...
Yeah, exactly.
He's not still molesting them, is he?
Eric, he was, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
He was 18.
He was 18, he was still getting molested.
Pretty much. I think around that age, yeah.
God.
They talk about, had there been another option, they would have taken it. Again, insinuating that they didn't think that there was any other way out, which doesn't sound like a cold-hearted killing. You're not doing this out of revenge or whatever. You're doing this because you don't think there is another option.
Yeah, because where do they go, right? Everything that you have in this life is afforded to you based on your parents' wealth, right? Fair enough. If you didn't have a lot of money and you knew that you could get by on very little, then maybe you could step out into the world and go, do you know what, I'll be fine because I know how to get by on very little. But when you live this really rich, privileged lifestyle where your family spends tens of thousands of dollars potentially in a day, you think, well, if I step out this door and I have nothing,
how do I fend for myself?
How do I fend for myself in any way, right? How do you exist? So I can get it that way. They don't have a sense of like how you can get by without your parents' support. And they're using that as leverage to kind of, control them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about control. Erik's also heard crying heavily on the tapes and he's distraught. He says that he loves his parents, particularly his father, which experts say that victims of sexual abuse from family members can sometimes feel these complicated feelings when it comes to that kind of dynamic. And again, it just doesn't sound to me, when you hear that, he hates his father. I don't know. It's really complicated to understand, I think, in terms of how Erik actually feels about his parents. And most importantly, which I think is telling, the doctor is heard laughing at times on the tape. He seems relaxed, therefore doesn't seem like he's in fear of his life, which is what he claims to be when he testifies. And to be fair, the next time he sees the brothers is actually at their trial. He makes no attempt to have a follow-up session, given the severity of the situation.
Really? Wow.
So this tape is a crucial piece of evidence for people who defend the brothers, say it should not be relied upon because the conversation is engineered by the doctor and he fails as his role as a therapist.
Yeah, but I mean, I get that there's a side of it where he is trying to coerce them into giving over information, but he's not coercing them to give false information. I think he's just trying to edge out information from them. And I think people are clever enough to read between the lines and see past kind of the way that he's asking these questions or what he's trying to orchestrate and just look at the facts of what's being said. They're still guilty. It's still an admission of guilt, whether or not there is another layer to it based on what the doctor's trying to get out of it. People can separate the two, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. So at the second trial, the brothers are both found guilty of first-degree murder in 1996 and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Initially, Lyle and Erik were kept apart in different prisons for around 22 years. They kept in touch by writing letters back and forth, even playing a chess match via mail, which must have been...
How does that work?
Well, I'm guessing you're just...
Very slow, isn't it?
Yeah, like one move per letter.
And what if you're playing this game and they're mailing back and forth and then someone comes into the cell, accidentally knocks over the chessboard and you're like, oh.
Well, that's the thing. I can't imagine... Would they have done that, or would they have like drawn a little diagram on their letter?
I reckon they're just playing the game
via mail. That's why I thought.
But each time they've got to draw a new chessboard and relay the pieces every time one piece moves.
That would be, I mean, this must have lasted.
Yeah. What if you write the whole letter and then at the bottom you draw your chess piece or your chess setup and then you go, oh, damn it, I put the piece in the wrong place. You want to redo your move, but then you've got to write the whole letter again.
Perhaps they're mailing a couple of times a week, but then maybe there's no real updates. So just like, hi, Erik. Queen to L7, whatever.
It is quite a clever way of doing it, though, because you get to spend a lot of time really pondering in between letters about like what your next move will be, and you can plan ahead. It's a good way of kind of planning strategically.
According to a People magazine article, Lyle had spent some of his time lifting weights, playing basketball, caring for a pet lizard. He also served as the president of the inmate government and led a support group for victims of sexual abuse. In 2018, Lyle was transferred to the same prison that his brother Erik was at, so they could have a chance to be closer together. So they weren't in the same cells, but I guess during recreation time, they could catch up and stuff like that. It also seems that they have rehabilitated. For one thing, they have wives. Lyle is on his second marriage, to be fair, to a woman called Rebecca Sneed. She says that they're not allowed conjugal visits? Conjugal? What is it?
Congenial? Congenial?
Conjugal?
Consensual?
They're not allowed to have sex.
Yeah. Damn it!
And Erik, he married Tammy Ruth back in 1999. They got married in a prison waiting room, and their wedding cake was a Twinkie.
Love it!
Which I guess is the best you can get.
Yeah, that's it. Hey, prison board, we're getting married. Could you possibly spare like a cake? And we're thinking maybe a 5-tier cake, chocolate double ganache, like with sprinkles on top and like really elegant, like the whole shebang. Like, we don't really have budget for that. Okay, how about we negotiate down to 3 tiers? And they're like, yeah, still don't think the budget's going to crack to that. Okay, 2 tiers? 1 tier? Best we can do is a Twinkie.
I'll take it.
Okay, yeah, I'll take it. Have you ever had a Twinkie?
They're disgusting. No offense, America.
No. The reason why it's disgusting, Adam, and I guarantee you, is because when you have a Twinkie in the UK, they are dry because they've come all the way from America. But when you get them when they're moist and they're juicy, sometimes you get cream on one end and chocolate on the other end. When they're really juicy and moist,
Yeah, but it tastes so fake.
I don't know. It just tastes like sponge. It's really good.
No. Don't get me wrong. I love some Reese's Pieces and some peanut butter M&Ms.
That's not chocolate. That guy who invented Hershey's was supposed to be on the Titanic. He could have died on that ship. Otherwise, we wouldn't have Hershey's.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you know why they call them Hershey's Kisses?
No.
It's because when the machine is pumping them out and then it hits the thing and then pulls the chocolate away, it sounds like a little kiss.
Ah.
The machine sounds like a kiss, yeah.
No one would know that, though, because no one's around the machines.
That's true.
Erik has now turned to God and is now sharing the gospel with fellow inmates. So it's interesting to hear he is teaching others about God's love for people, something he perhaps didn't get to have from his own parents. Like many others in their situation, the Menendez brothers have filed multiple appeals, all of which have been denied. And so without new evidence, it's difficult for a retrial to be granted. But in recent years, there have been some developments. In 2023, a letter written by Erik to his cousin Andy in December 1988, well before the murders, has surfaced. Andy was the cousin who Erik had confided in as a child about was it normal for fathers and sons to do what they do. And Andy was like, no way. And in this letter, Erik confides and says, I've been trying to avoid Dad. It's still happening, Andy, but it's worse for me now. He's so overweight, but I can't stand to see him. I never know when it's going to happen, and it's driving me crazy every night. I say to myself, I think he might come in. I need to put it out of my mind. I know what you said before, but I'm afraid you just don't know Dad like I do. He's crazy. He warned me about 100 times about telling anyone, especially Lyle. Am I serious with this? I don't know. I'll make it through this. I can handle it.
What?
So he had put this down in writing in a letter from, I think, several months before the murder.
God, and he was still coming into his room.
So Andy passed away in 2003 from an accidental overdose of sleeping pills.
Shit, okay. Why did he not come forward with that letter then if he knew he had it? Did he forget that he had it?
So his mother believes that keeping the secret may have contributed to his death, Andy's death, because he found it unimaginable. I guess he had this guilt. And so she only found the letter going through some of his stuff back in 2023, and that's how it came up. Some argue, could Erik have then wrote the letter after the murders to try and plant evidence about it before? But Erik's auntie, the mother of Andy, is like, I don't think so. I believe Erik because of what's happened to her son, the way that he dealt with Erik being in prison.
So now this letter's out in the open, what happens?
We don't actually know. This came out last year and nothing has really been talked about.
This is up to date.
As updated as it could be.
So what's happening then? So where are we at?
Well, that's the thing. That's not all. Last year, there was a report from a man named Roy Rosello. He was a former member of a Latin boy band called Menudo that José Menendez signed with RCA Records.
Okay.
He's come forward with allegations that José drugged and assaulted him when he was 14 years old.
Okay.
So
he's
new
got
evidence,
no skin in the game
Yeah.
in terms of like connection with the brothers. He's come forward and said he molested me as well.
Exactly. It proves that José was a sexual predator and demonstrates that Lyle and Erik were not lying. but there's no clear update on exactly what's happening with both these new pieces of information.
Sure.
So I don't know if that is spurring things on and the case is going to be reopened. We've got the new TV show that's coming out. So I think it's going to get a whole lot more focus.
Yes. So that's really interesting because at a criminal trial, you have to obviously prove without reasonable doubt whether or not they did this.
Yeah.
Which, of course, they did do it, but their reasons and motivations behind it. But the thing is, if you went to a civil trial, you would just have to prove, is he more likely than not to have molested the boys?
Yeah.
In terms of putting the father on trial, basically. Put the father on trial, even though he's dead. Can you do that?
No, I don't think you can.
So you can just pardon them. But the thing is that they did do it. So they'll probably get off with time served because they've been in prison all this time. Then they'll be like, well, you've served X amount and the penalty for manslaughter, which is what we'll downgrade your charges to, means that you will serve, let's say, 10 years, but you've already served 15 years, so you get out for time served.
I think that could be something like that. I don't know if it would be manslaughter or would be a different degree of murder, not first degree. I think there was another level that they could potentially...
Yeah, I don't know what it would be, because at the end of the day...
Motive, I guess.
The biggest issue I have with this, though, is them killing their mother, because they say that killing mum was a mercy killing.
No, that's what Dr. Oziel says, not what they say necessarily.
But then their mother wasn't the one molesting them.
She was washing them and she was...
Sure, washing them, but...
And she made, I think, Lyle touch her. And so, I don't know. She knew about it. She was complicit.
You could argue, though, as you mentioned earlier on, the older brother was molesting the younger brother because of what he was taught from his father, and you said that was quite common. Could the same not be said for the mother, though?
Maybe.
She was in an abusive marriage. He may have been taking advantage of her. He may have been forcing himself on her. She may have a very unhealthy attitude towards sex and what's appropriate, what's not. Could she be just as much a victim as them?
She certainly sounds like she wasn't in a good state of mind. I don't know if that's justification, but maybe it's an explanation. So yeah, we've got the new TV show coming out. There's also been various different documentaries and other sort of TV, movie type shows. Even Courtney Love played Kitty in one of them a few years back. So it's been documented
Courtney Love of all people, though.
Yeah.
Wow.
So at this point in time, the Menendez brothers, they've been in prison for about 33 years. Some people believe they deserve to stay there, feeling their crimes were too brutal to forgive. And I do agree, 2 wrongs don't make a right. Should they have served time and have some punishment for what they did? Probably yes, particularly how violent those deaths were. Others, however, argue that given their abuse that they endured, this was a genuine reason that they were scared for their life and they acted out of desperation. We've seen it before with Lorena Bobbitt and Gypsy Rose, 2 people who did some awful things, but you had sympathy for them because of the abuse that they had received.
Yeah, exactly, for sure.
A lot of their family believe they should be freed now and they've served their time. Some of the family keep in touch, and so there seems like there's no grudge, which suggests that José and Kitty were kind of pieces of shit. So it's a very complicated, messy situation, and it's hard to come down firmly on one side or the other. Maybe they deserve another trial with all the evidence on the table and letting a new jury decide. Perhaps that's the fairest thing. And so, yeah, that is the story of the Menendez murders and Erik and Lyle Menendez.
Wow, who knew that it was that mental? I just thought they watched a television show, they were greedy rich kids, and they decided to go and murder their dad, who was presumably innocent of everything.
Well, that's what the prosecution said. They thought, like, you were inspired by this TV show and that's why you did what you did. And they were like, no, we watched it.
And it had some good ideas. But they were legitimately good ideas, right? Perfect for our situation.
We could relate.
Shit.
Yeah. Well, shall we run the outro?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it.
And that's it for another episode of The Compendium. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow us on your favourite podcast app. It really helps us when you do. Next week's episode is available 7 days early on our free access Patreon. For more content, subscribe to our Certified Freaks tier for access to our entire backlog, exclusive posts and sneak peeks. We release new episodes every Tuesday. Until then, remember, what we see on the surface is rarely the full truth. Sometimes the perpetrator can also be the victim. Until next week.
See you later.